What if I told you that one of the most overlooked threats to your health in your 60s, 70s, and 80s isn't about what you're eating or how much you exercise, but about something far more personal? What if the absence of intimacy, the quiet fading of touch, closeness, and connection wasn't harmless, but silently draining your energy, clarity, and joy from the inside out? And what if no one ever warned you about it? No doctor, no friend, no health article, until now? If that's where you find yourself, if sex is no longer part of your life, I need to tell you something that may truly surprise you. Because this conversation isn't just about pleasure. It's about something much deeper. It's about your heart, your brain, and your quiet connection to feeling alive. And if no one else has said this to you before, then let me be the first. I'm Dr. James. I've spent over 3 decades helping men and women reclaim their well-being after 60. And over the years, I've seen one common pattern again and again. When we stop treating sex as a luxury and start seeing it as a vital part of aging well, everything begins to shift. You might believe, that part of my life is over. You might think, it's too late. But here's the truth. When intimacy disappears, 4 specific consequences begin to take hold. And they're not just emotional. They're physical, real, and in many cases, preventable. Most people don't hear about these consequences until it's too late. But you don't have to be one of them. The good news? It's never too late to reconnect with this part of yourself. In this video, I'll walk you through what really happens when intimacy fades, and more importantly, how to bring it back into your life in a way that's safe, natural, and deeply healing. And in just a moment, we'll begin with what I consider the most surprising risk of all. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe and tap the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss a video that helps you live stronger, longer, and more deeply connected. And if this message resonates with you, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0, so I know how to better support your journey. Let's begin. 1. Your brain begins to age faster than it should. I want to share a story with you. Years ago, I met a man named George. He was 72, a retired math teacher. He came into my office concerned about something most of us eventually face: forgetfulness. He'd misplace names, lose focus mid-conversation, and often described himself as just not sharp anymore. But here's the thing. Medically, everything seemed fine. No signs of dementia, no clear neurological issues, no major red flags. Until, after several honest conversations, George shared something deeply personal. He hadn't been sexually active since his wife passed away, nearly 5 years. Now, most people would brush that off. But not me. And not the research. Because science and experience tell us something important. When sexual intimacy disappears, the brain starts to lose one of its most powerful sources of stimulation. Sexual activity increases blood flow to key areas of the brain, especially those responsible for memory, emotion, and learning. It activates the release of dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, natural chemicals that help lift mood, reduce stress, and actually slow the aging process within the brain. When you take that away, month after month, year after year, the brain slowly begins to dim. Focus slips, energy drops, and most importantly, the risk of cognitive decline and even early dementia increases. No, sex isn't a miracle drug, but it is one of the most human, primal ways we protect mental clarity and emotional vibrancy, because at its core, intimacy keeps us connected, not just to others, but to ourselves. And that connection is what keeps the mind alert, the spirit engaged, and the body motivated to thrive. When intimacy vanishes, people begin to withdraw. They become less social, less curious, less expressive. They lose interest in the world around them and in caring for themselves. That fading isn't just emotional, it's neurological. And that's why I take it so seriously. Because once the mind begins to fade in this way, it becomes harder and harder to reverse. But here's the encouraging part. With the right awareness and gentle steps, you can keep your brain sharp, alive, and emotionally active well into your later decades. Now, While the brain may whisper the first signs of disconnection, the body doesn't stay silent for long. Coming up next, we'll explore what happens to your circulation, your strength, and your hormonal balance when sex slowly disappears from your life. And trust me, it's something most people completely overlook. We've just seen how losing intimacy after 60 can quietly accelerate brain aging, stealing clarity and emotional connection long before most people realize it. But the effects don't stop there. They move from your mind into your body. 2. Your body loses vital circulation and hormonal balance. I remember sitting across from Linda and Carl, a couple in their late 60s who had been married for nearly 40 years. They still shared laughter, companionship, and history. But something had quietly faded. We just assumed that part of life was over, Linda said gently, almost with guilt. Carl nodded. But then he added something that struck me. I don't feel like myself anymore. My energy's low, I've lost strength, put on weight, and honestly, I just feel old. When we looked deeper, the missing piece wasn't in their diet or medication. It was in their connection. Their intimacy had gone completely silent. And sadly, that's a story I've heard far too many times. Because here's what happens when sexual activity disappears after 60. Your body starts to lose its natural rhythm. The cardiovascular boost that normally comes from arousal and physical connection fades away. Circulation slows down, blood vessels become less responsive. Oxygen delivery to vital organs, including the heart and brain, declines. And over time, that quiet slowdown affects everything. Energy, stamina, even how well you sleep. Sex isn't just about pleasure. It's a form of gentle exercise. It gets your heart pumping, boosts lung capacity, and supports circulation. And when it disappears, your body notices. But what concerns me most isn't just blood flow, it's hormones. In both men and women, sexual stimulation plays a critical role in maintaining hormonal balance. For men, the absence of arousal and release can cause testosterone levels to drop, leading to fatigue, irritability, muscle loss, weight gain, and even signs of depression. For women, the decline in estrogen and oxytocin can increase the risk of joint pain, bone thinning, mood swings, and a general sense of emotional flatness. These aren't just nuisances. They affect mobility, independence, and long-term quality of life. And worst of all, these changes rarely happen suddenly. They creep in slowly. You stop walking as fast. You don't feel like going out. You sleep less. You gain weight. And eventually you chalk it up to just getting older. But much of it may be the direct result of lost intimacy, not age itself. Here's what many don't realize. You don't need intercourse to see these benefits return. Gentle touch, skin-to-skin closeness, even emotional intimacy can reactivate the hormonal and circulatory systems. It's not about performance, it's about presence. But the longer this disconnection lasts, the harder it becomes to restore balance. And yet, even that physical decline doesn't touch what may be the most devastating consequence of all. 3. Your relationship and self-worth may quietly suffer. I've often said the loudest pain in a relationship is not shouting. It's silence. That silence lives in the space between couples who've been together for decades. It's not angry, it's not dramatic, but it's heavy. It's the kind of silence that slowly replaces laughter, touch, and the small gestures that once said, "You matter to me." I sat with a woman named Margaret once. She was 74. Her husband had survived cancer, but in the process, they had stopped being intimate. With tears in her eyes, she told me, "I don't want him to feel pressured, but I miss being touched. I miss feeling like his partner, not just his caregiver." That sentence broke something open in the room, because so many couples, especially in later life, live with that same quiet ache. When sex fades, we often stop reaching out. We stop initiating. We stop believing we're desirable. And what takes its place is a unique kind of loneliness. Not just the loneliness of being alone, but the painful feeling of being unseen by the person who once knew you better than anyone else. Over time, that distance hardens. It turns into resentment, or shame, or a quiet kind of sadness that neither partner knows how to name. And what about those who are single? This isn't just about couples. When we stop believing we are worthy of closeness, whether emotional or physical, we don't just lose connection. We lose a piece of ourselves. The part that wants to be touched, to be held, to feel fully alive in a body that still deserves joy and that erosion of self-worth. It doesn't show up on lab tests, but it steals something precious, your spark, your radiance, your desire to live fully. You can be surrounded by loved ones and still feel emotionally starved. You can be a devoted partner and still feel undesired. And that emptiness, if left unspoken, can quietly lead to depression, anxiety, withdrawal, and even physical decline. Because the human heart wasn't built to live without connection. But here's the most powerful truth I can offer you. It doesn't have to stay this way. Even small steps toward affection, holding hands, eye contact, open conversations, can begin to rebuild what was lost. I've watched couples in their 70s flirt again, laugh again, fall in love again. Not because their bodies were perfect, but because they dared to reach for each other again. Still, as heavy as all of this is, the next consequence might be the most serious of all. Because when intimacy disappears, it's not just your brain, your body, or your relationship at risk. It could actually shorten the number of years you have left. Let me show you what the science reveals. Next, we've explored how intimacy affects your brain, your body, and your emotional connection to others. But perhaps the most sobering truth is this. Losing intimacy doesn't just make life feel smaller. It may actually shorten your life altogether. 4. You may be shortening your life without knowing it. I once had the honor of caring for a man named Robert. He was 81 years old, sharp, funny, fiercely independent. But what struck me most wasn't his lab results or his heart health. It was the unmistakable light in his eyes. He looked alive, engaged, joyful. And when I asked him what he thought kept him going, he smiled with a kind of boyish pride and said, "I still flirt with my wife every morning. We hold each other every night. And sometimes," he laughed, "we still make love." It wasn't about performance or youth. It was about connection. That glimmer of closeness, that sense of being wanted and seen, was what kept him vibrant, not just emotionally, but biologically. What Robert may not have known, but what science continues to confirm, is that regular physical intimacy, in any form, is associated with longer life. I'm not talking about passion straight out of a romance novel. I'm talking about gentle, consistent connection, touch, affection, emotional closeness that fuels your entire system. Studies have shown that acts of intimacy release powerful natural chemicals like oxytocin and endorphins, which reduce inflammation, regulate blood pressure, calm the nervous system, and protect your heart. In fact, a major study published in the British Medical Journal found that older adults who maintained an active sex life had significantly lower mortality rates. That's not speculation, that's data. Touch isn't just soothing, it's life-extending. Physical affection improves sleep. It reduces cortisol, the stress hormone that ages the body prematurely. It strengthens immunity, supports cellular repair, and boosts emotional well-being. But when intimacy disappears, whether from loss, avoidance, or neglect, the body responds. Stress levels remain high, sleep becomes disrupted. You move less, engage less, feel less alive. And slowly but steadily, the systems that keep you strong begin to weaken. Too often, people mistake this decline as a normal part of aging. But many times, it starts not with illness, but with disconnection. Because your body was designed to thrive on closeness, to be held, to be touched, to be known. And when you deprive it of that, even unintentionally, the risks multiply. Chronic illness, emotional isolation, even premature death. That may sound harsh, but I've seen it again and again. And I've also seen the opposite. People in their 70s, 80s, even 90s come alive again. Not because they reversed time, but because they dared to reconnect. Which brings us to the most important truth in this entire conversation. 5. It's never too late to start again. I'll never forget Eleanor. She was 78 when she came to see me. Poised, thoughtful, mentally sharp, but carrying something heavy beneath the surface. With a trembling voice, she said, "I miss feeling like a woman. Not a grandmother. Not a patient. Just a woman." It had been nearly a decade since she'd felt physical affection of any kind, and like many others, she had quietly convinced herself that part of her life was over. What she didn't know, and what I see again and again, is that the human spirit has an extraordinary ability to reawaken, even after years of silence, even after grief, even after decades of feeling invisible, whether you're 60 or 90, whether it's been months or many years, as long as you're alive, connection is possible. Desire may change, your body may respond differently, but the need to be touched, to be seen, to be held with tenderness, that never expires. And rebuilding intimacy doesn't require grand gestures. Often it begins with a conversation, a soft touch, a shared laugh, a simple, "I miss you." For couples who've drifted apart, that first step can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. But I've watched couples who hadn't touched in years rediscover one another in the most beautiful ways. Not because their bodies were what they once were, but because their hearts were finally willing. And if you're single, widowed, or navigating life alone, don't think for a second that this message isn't for you. Reconnection can begin with yourself. Your body is still worthy of kindness. Your spirit still longs for joy. And your future still holds room for touch, trust, and maybe even love again. Whether it's through therapeutic touch, close friendship, or simply allowing yourself to feel again, the path remains open. The question is not, can I get this back? The question is, am I willing to try? I've worked with countless people who were convinced their time had passed. Some were facing illness. Others carried shame, fear, or emotional scars from long ago. But when they gave themselves permission to try, with no pressure, no expectations, something shifted. They began to laugh again, sleep better, move more. But more than anything, they began to feel like themselves again. You are not too old. You are not too far gone. Your story is not over. In fact, the most meaningful chapter might still be ahead of you. So let me ask you this. If you knew that one small act of connection could bring back your vitality, joy, and a sense of aliveness, what would stop you from taking it? Let's close this journey with the message I hope you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. Because what comes next is the truth that could change everything. 6. Conclusion. If you've stayed with me until now, I want to offer something deeper than a thank you. I want to acknowledge you, not just for watching or listening, but for opening your heart to a conversation that most people shy away from. Talking about sex, talking about aging, talking about the ache for closeness that never truly goes away. These are not easy things to face. They stir up discomfort, regret, and for some, grief. But they also hold the potential for something beautiful. Healing. Because if there's one truth I've learned after decades of walking beside older adults, it's this. The desire to feel alive, to feel connected, to feel seen. It never leaves us. It simply gets buried, under time, under silence, under the false belief that we no longer deserve it. We've talked about how intimacy, when it disappears, quietly affects your brain, your body, your hormones, your relationships, and even your longevity. These aren't minor side effects. They are life-altering truths. But what ties them all together, and what I want you to remember, is this. None of them are permanent. I've witnessed reconnection after decades of distance. I've seen widows and widowers rediscover love in their 70s and 80s, not out of desperation, but out of the simple desire to feel human again. I've seen men who thought they'd lost their confidence begin to walk taller, and women who once believed their best years were behind them look in the mirror and smile. Not because someone else told them they were beautiful, but because they remembered it themselves. And do you know what every one of these transformations had in common? They began with permission. Permission to hope, to reach out, to try again. This isn't about turning back the clock. It's about reclaiming what still belongs to you. Connection, joy, intimacy, emotional aliveness. These things are not reserved for the young. If anything, they become more precious with age. Because as we grow older, What feeds the body may change, but what nourishes the soul becomes clearer than ever. So wherever you are, married, widowed, divorced, single, unsure, I want you to hear this. Your story is not over. There is still room for warmth, for laughter, for healing. There is still time to open the door, even just a little, to something new. If something inside you has been whispering, maybe I could try. Please, listen to it. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need one small step. Maybe that step is a conversation. Maybe it's a gentle touch. Maybe it's simply allowing yourself to imagine closeness again. Because you are not done. Not even close. And if no one's told you lately, you deserve to feel desired, connected, and fully alive. Not someday, not in memory, now. Let this moment be the beginning. Your best chapter might still be waiting to be written. If this message touched you in any way, I'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and leave a comment below. Whether you type 1 to say it resonated or share a story of your own, your voice matters, and you never know. Your words might be the light someone else has been waiting for.